Welcome, everyone, to Breaking the Surface with Sharon Zeugin. Hi, my name's Mary Taylor. I'm a calligrapher and a member of the Portland Society for Calligraphy. So, a little bit about Sharon. In addition to being a faculty member of numerous international conferences, she teaches locally in her studio and at the Austin Contemporary Art School. Her award-winning work appears in the Speedball textbook, Letter Arts Review, the Calligrapher's Engagement Calendar, Somerset Studio Magazine, and the Lark book, The Art and Craft of Hand Lettering. In addition to teaching and exhibiting her work, she works as a graphic recorder and a sketch note artist. That was something new to me. Influenced by her training as a therapist, Sharon seeks to cultivate a safe classroom environment in which respect for body, mind, and spirit are all important as skill building, where students are encouraged to experience art making as an experimental, intuitive, and mindful practice. Sharon's goal is to help students get over fear of the blank page. We are so fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from Sharon today. Welcome, Sharon, to Make It Your Lettering Year. We are so excited to have you as our guest today, and we look forward to learning from you.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Heather. I really appreciate y'all driving the ship or holding or steering the ship while I facilitate this gathering. And I do want to say welcome to everybody. I really appreciate the time you're willing to take out of your very busy schedules to join me in the studio. And I want to just start by just talking about the approach to this time together, as well as most of the classes that I facilitate. And many of you all know this, but it bears repeating. First of all, I want to say wherever you are is the entry point. That is by the poet Kabir. So I'm reminding you that you know enough already to do what we're going to do or to play into these pages today. And this class/play shop is less about how to and more about what if. And it's really, I think of it in terms of, well, first of all, let's think of the title, Breaking the Surface. And like, if you read the description of it, I rather than thinking of something breaking into the surface coming from out in, I thought of something emerging and growing up through. And that's how I experience the blank page. And I also think about not just the surface of the page, but what about my assumptions about how I greet the page? Could I break the surface of that too? So I'm thinking through, inviting us to consider, and if breaking is too harsh of a word, it's like, oh, what if I shifted my assumption about what I'm supposed to do? What if I shifted or I allowed for something to emerge besides my old patterns of doing things? What if I can break new ground by having an attitude of curiosity, wonder, and compassion? As I always say in my classes, I repeat, the only rule I have is the reverse golden rule, which is do unto yourself as you would your neighbor, meaning be kind to yourself as you play on the page. And as I realize as we talk, what I would like you to do is open, if you have a sketchbook, I'd like you to open it somewhere in the middle and just take out 3 tools. And I want you to just start doodling while you listen. And I promise I won't talk for long, but it's really important. I think that at least I articulate how I see our flow of show going, and also reiterate the type of invitation that this class is. So for instance, I have my little, oh my gosh, elegant right. I used to be so snobby about these things. The little felt tip marker. I have one of these and I have a pencil. So feel free to doodle. If you feel like, oh, I can't go back into that blank page yet, and my journal is too beautiful and fresh, that's all the reason to do that. And we'll be talking about that in a little bit too. So I promise we'll get to it. I just really want to talk about this process. And what I'm about as a teacher is encouraging the process of play and improvisation. Now, granted, we have to know things in order to, have a visual vocabulary to play with in order to do that. And I'll be talking about that in a little bit. But what I'm hoping for today, though, is giving you permission to discover, to ignite your imagination, and also to trust your intuition and your inner wisdom. I've been writing a book for 4 years. Gosh, it's taking a long time, but it's really about that, about liberating your own creative expression, guided by your own internal compass, less on the external, this is how you do it, or this is the approval I get from doing it, but more on your own inner wisdom. So you see all those pieces around you. I couldn't do those if I were relying just on an outer voice telling me what to do. And so improvisation is the kind of the means by which we can ignite our imagination and tap into our intuition. And I think journals in particular, our blank books, or a blank piece of paper, are vehicles for that. So that's a little bit about the why do we do these things? It's to really connect with ourselves too. As a calligrapher, I started questioning early along, what are we learning these letters for? It's for something to be able to, for me, it was to express something uniquely personal to me. And lately, letters haven't been the stars of the show. It's more images, and as you can see in the background, animals. But all of that is to say that I've learned to trust this inner compass. And that is how I break new ground, how I grow things onto the page, is through that trust. Everybody with me so far? Okay, so I am going to, now that you've had a little chance to play with whatever tools you have, I'm going to switch my my view, so you're not just looking at me and my studio, and you're going to see some things on the page. So what I'm going to do is, well, you can see these are my notes. But what I want to do is remind us of things before we begin. Well, we have begun, but in addition to beginning, we can remind ourselves of what we can do with our lettering. Now, this is not a class, again, about lettering. This is not a class about formal lettering. It's a class where we can take what we know, regardless of your experience, and use that visual vocabulary to get out on the page, to break that surface, to grow something that is uniquely ours. So I'm just going to remind you that, and this was done with this very humble, elegant writer pen, which is, I love it for many reasons, and I'll show you those in a minute. But I just want to review some of the things we can consider as we're going, and that is when we write. And again, we're not looking at this like, I was just talking earlier about taking John Stevens' class. I love that. It's like going back to the bar, not the bar, the drinking kind, but I love to really work on my letter forms, and then I like to let it go. And that doesn't mean to fall into disarray, but then I like to just trust that I know that it's in my bones, and then I can come out and do what I do, which is more improvisational and informal stuff. I'll have those bones and I can dance. That's what I'm trying to say. I dance with the bones. So one of the things we can consider, as I invite you in a minute to do our first fun getting out onto the page, or our second, because I already asked you to do that, is we can take just simple capitals and we can compress them. And why are we doing this? We're suddenly breaking new ground because I'm saying we're not going to be concerned about the space between the words. So that's something to consider. We can stretch our letters. And you guys are willing or can try that already on the page that you're doing. And I will be showing how to incorporate these things in just a minute. But also, we can do kind of a syncopated pattern with our letters. We can compress. So I'm just using my basic knowledge of capitals and my beloved informal italic to make some interesting patterns and textures on the page. And already it has kind of a pleasing look to it because I'm in like this kind of compression, it makes a visual or a graphic element. And if you squint on the page, it's also making this a darker element. So we're concerning ourselves with values. So these are things in formal composition that we think about, especially, and we can refer back to, especially as we start improvising and we get stuck and you go, oh, I don't know what to do with this mess. We can come back to what we know about, oh, maybe things need to be darker or lighter, or maybe we need repetition, that sort of thing. So that is a reminder of all the things we can do with just our simple, this marker, and also with what we know. And in preparation for today, I did this page where and I'll do another one so you can see me. I took this marker, I took a Tombow and a pencil. Those were my three things. And I just started playing with this idea of stretching and seeing where and compressing and seeing where things could go. So this is what I was doing in my art class the other day. It's a whole other thing. So this again is a review, and it's part of the visual vocabulary of breaking out of our usual way of doing things. And many of you have already done this, but I'm just going to run through it, especially for those who may not be familiar. I am going to write several things using this marker, and I'm not worried about it being broad edge. I love that it's got a broad edge, but I'm going to be twisting and turning. I'm going to use this in a different way than you might expect in formal calligraphy training. I'm going to think of several words that I want to engage with today, and I'm going to write them all differently. So I'm going to, can't write and talk at the same time. So I wrote the word imagination, I stretched it out. I could also write it like that. I could also write it like this. And what if I really want to remember imagination? I'll write it again. But in addition to writing this word out, I'm also playing with graphic elements. So I've got this stretched out bit and I'm compressing this and I'm creating a block of writing, this over here, and so on and so forth. So that's just a little bit of an idea of what we'll be playing with today. And to get us out on the page, this, by the way, friends, it's a very simple exercise, and I do it quite often actually in my classes, but it's really important because it was the beginning of my journey of improvisation. I was so I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I also want to say something about that perfection and preciousness. My friend Stephanie, who's taking a class with me, said preciousness and perfectionism lead to paralysis, the 3 Ps. And that was me in a nutshell. I was always looking for the right way to do something, always trying to be, I've got to be the best. I've got to, pay attention to the margins, very straight up in my approach. And I got to Roehampton where I studied calligraphy, and my teachers had us do this little exercise. And this is the one I'm going to ask you to do with me, and we'll do it together. And I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to show you, I did it this morning, and this is where I ended up. Not that you're going to end up in the same place. And that's another thing I want to emphasize. You will end up in an entirely different place than I am. So I'm going to take several of my tools, and here's the invitation. So open your page, if you have a blank journal, to the middle, or you can do it in the back if you want, or you can do it in the front. And I'm going to ask you you can either write down these words ahead of time or think of them as you go. And in fact, I'm going to encourage you to do that. That is one of the things that I've discovered about myself that that I really like to do is I do stream of consciousness improvisation. So I write on the surface of something, I break the surface of it, and I allow the breakthrough from my unconscious to come up. So I will be free associating. But today I've been thinking about the word imagination. I am really thinking that that's going to save our world. We are severely looking around, and I'm not going to bring in anything of the outer world in here other than an observation that we are sorely lacking in imagination. So we can contribute to imagination and the growth of that and amplification of that by meditating on that and allowing ourselves to play on the page, because that's where we're going to make new discoveries, not in the tried and true path. Although we don't want to eliminate that either, but like getting off into the side roads and the tributaries. So I am actually going to write the word imagination. I'm going to use my first tool, and I'm using this China marker because it is going to make an invisible set of marks on my page. And I'm going to write the word imagination, and it may take up the whole page. I'm thinking of Yves Letorme, who it was really funny. At one point, he said, "We really need to mess up your writing." I had worked for so many years to, get my writing in a certain way. And he just said, "We need to mess you up." I love that. I think about that all the time. So I've written the word imagination. So whatever your word is with your tool, I invite you to write it. Don't be afraid of edges. I invite you to go off the edge. Here's your chance to, really be audacious and try that thing you've seen somebody else do. You don't have to go fast. You can go slow. Feel what the tool is like in your hand. Maybe stop and start a little bit as you're going. I would encourage you to keep your tool on the page, not a lot of lifting. And again, you'll see me go off the page many times. So then I'm going to turn my book, my pages 90 degrees. I think that's right, because I didn't do well in math and I still have a math phobia. But so I turned it, it was horizontal, now it is upright. So I'm going to write another word that I've been thinking about. So one that you'll hear me talk about a lot. And I'm thinking about, oh yeah, I just told them about the stretching things across. Well, I did that, but I don't know exactly where my white word landed. But I'm going to write the word intuition, and I'm going to continue, and mystery. I'm not going to lift my pen. And you'll notice that I actually come back and cross the T's. Oh, I cross it backwards, but I cross it after, because when I teach like italic, I have people really get into I teach the forest for the trees first to get an idea of how it feels in your body, the rhythm of the writing. And then the trees are, of course, the individual letter forms. But as I always go back to the pattern and the rhythm. And so I can always go back and add the crossbars after, in order to keep that rhythm going. So that's what's up right there. So now I'm going to turn my page again. And you're going, okay, well, how do I know where to write the next word? So that's what we're going to be doing, is writing a word or a phrase repeatedly, but each time we're going to turn our page. And why do we do that? And we're going to use a different tool, but I'm only using 3 tools, maybe 4, because I don't want the page to get too chaotic for me. Although part of this will be playing into messes and then finding our way to bring coherency to them. Because it's sometimes in the messes and in the thicket where we find inspiration. So now maybe I'm gonna rewrite, let's see, I'll write the word serendipity. I feel like writing it. I'm actually breaking my own rule. I'm gonna write it with this tool, which is a Tombow. So what am I doing? I'm actually writing into the line. I'm not, when I first did that, I think I had words here, here, and I started going, wait, they're all so far away from each other. Who says they can't cross over? Who says they can't, it was it was an extraordinary revelation to me that I could have things going off the edge, that I could have things, going into the margins. Um, so now I'm going to go back to what I talked about very briefly with stacking the letters. And again, I'm coming back. I believe I sent this to Heather, and this is a handout that I put in probably every class that I teach, just showing and reminding us how lettering and clumps of letters, blocks of lettering can make interesting texture. So I'm going to make a texture out of one of my words. I am going to write out inner wisdom over and over again. And I'm going to smash it up. Meaning I'm going to make a texture out of it. And I turn my page again. So I keep turning the page over and over again. And I could go, I'm starting to see an interesting, look how the space is broken up. And that's sort of like, oh my gosh, now it's like something has emerged out of this turning the page over and over, not being afraid to go into the line or to write into something that's been done before. And now I've got something, and I could say, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And instead I say it with the attitude, oh, I wonder what goes next. And here's what happens with me. I'll immediately go, oh, I need something dark here. I'm thinking about this. This is the darkest thing on the page. So I'm thinking, oh, and it's not a thought. It's like a little voice. It's not like, oh, I hear voices. It's more like a sense of, oh, dark. And that has, developed over time of playing. And right as before our break, I'll go back and I'm going to show you some pages from my very first journal of improvisation. And that's the vehicle that really taught me to hear that voice and to trust it. Even when I'd sort of argue, like the voice would say red, and I'm like, no, I don't like red, but I'd follow it. So, but it's also just my wisdom or knowledge about design and about light and dark. And so I want something here. So I'm going to write the word vision. But I'm going to write it again, like my compressed version of it. So suddenly it's going to link this to this. And I might also write something over here. If I look over here, if I turn this, I go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder. Now I'm writing upside down. So if you're in a class, you'll hear me call activate the space. I felt like I wanted to activate that, which then closed this off. And now I have all these other interesting spaces. So what I'm doing is I'm improvising, but I'm also making decisions very quickly about, where to put stuff or where to put not where to put stuff. That sounds like I'm unloading a car of groceries. It is kind of hard to do this while I'm talking, but I'm just trying to model this for you. So I just keep going and I just keep playing and when I get stuck, I turn my page and go, okay, what does that need next? And and I forgot to say this for those of you who may not have a lot of lettering experience. You can use your handwriting for any of this. It doesn't have to be, a fancy tool. Forgot to mention this. I love when I'm playing with a broad edge marker, I like twisting it around so I get some interesting textures. So here I've got this kind of wild stuff going on. So now I am going to see what happens when I actually this is Bister ink and it's blue. So it might be very loud. I always think of Lori Doctor. She says phthalo blue is a very loud color. Or yeah, very loud color. I always think of that. This is not phthalo blue by any means, but I'm going to, and so I'm inviting you to do this too. Maybe I want to concentrate on this area so I can do this. And it doesn't have to be a rectangle, but why do I do a rectangle? Because I've got all this stuff going on that's kind of organic and flowy, and I just want to ground it in something in a shape. And you can see some of the white coming out. And I'll even write into the wet, whatever it is, whether it's watercolor, and it's already dried too much, but I'll get an interesting, something there. And so that's kind of how I did it. So when I did this in London many years ago, we were using broad edge pens and ink. And I don't even think we were varying the tools. But then our teacher walked over and handed us a little red square and said, okay, you have to incorporate the red square somewhere. So I was thinking that, somewhere here, if you were here with me in the studio, I would say, oh, here's a little square. And it's usually, it's something that we've done collaboratively. We'll have painted covers and I go around, I cut out squares of the paint that y'all have done, and then that becomes the landing site. So I'm thinking about that little red square. I might put it right there. And I have this, this page. I also think now I've introduced this one place, I might want to do something else with this writing. So, or with this tool, sorry. So maybe I've talked about edges and how you feel about edges. I love some of the books I make, I like to write along the edges. And I'm doing this very quickly, so I don't take up all your time with this. But then I could come back with my dirty brush and maybe I'll go like that. Now, if I wanted a more neat edge, I would do that. And so there is a page And I could keep going with that. And what I would suggest, if you're really want to do this as a practice, is, devote a whole sketchbook to this kind of thing. And then do more than one page. And that's what we're going to do next. We're going to continue on. Because the best way for me personally to get over preciousness is to have multiple things going on at the same time. Um, and also I can then say, okay, this doesn't feel finished, even though this was just an exercise. So it's contrived. It's something I asked us to do, and it didn't come from, well, it is coming from you. It's emerging. You're growing something on the page, but it was something that I asked you to do. But you could come back in later and you could put gouache over this. This morning I started, writing. I've been doing morning pages every day. And what are morning pages? A la Julia Cameron. It's all I could write some of my morning pages in here. What I'm doing is I'm writing and I'm adding texture. So we're back to design, but I'm also I'm just like a free fall of all my whatever thoughts or feelings, or maybe I'll write about a dream that I've had. And I'm not picking up my pencil, and I'm pressing intermittently while I'm doing this. And that makes an interesting texture too. So then I might, extend it along there. So all of this to say, this process is a way to experiment with writing words, using what you know about calligraphy, using your handwriting, and making it graphically interesting while you're also generating your own text. Now that is maybe a lot to think about. So in starting this practice, I would suggest have your words ready and even practice them, and then go onto the page. That said, I would probably also contradict myself and say, no, just get out on the page. I think, to quote Diane von Arx Anderson, who was in a class with me once, it's only paper. Now, paper is precious. Trees are precious. The good news is, what I tell my students, no paper left behind. If we don't like it, we can gesso over it. We can modify it. And that's part of this process too, that I think is so exciting. And believe me, I was very resistant to that for a long time. I was again, I'm a recovering perfection, preciousness person. I would get to a point where I'm so afraid to ruin this. And then after Yves Leterme invited me to mess things up, and what he means is a very carefully considered different groove or way to make a curve, for instance, in my lettering. This gives you an opportunity to try those things out and see. Is everybody with me so far? I wish I could walk around and see what everybody's up to. I'm going to go back to this morning when you weren't in the studio with me. I was walking through this process, and because I never asked you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. Now, again, I'm not gunning for great art. I'm not gunning for well, I don't like the word gun. Sorry. I am not trying so hard to make something. I'm experimenting and exploring with tools and materials that are simple and in my purview. And it's also a way of keeping the channel open of creativity. I think so many of us, and me included, we wait, or we live workshop to workshop, and we wait for somebody else to ignite the flame. And sometimes we need that. But this is a way to keep that flow going. And I notice now that my work as a graphic recorder, where I have to listen to like I'm in a corporate room and I'm listening to the speaker, and I have a 6x5 foot wall of foam core, and I have to write and draw as the person's talking. All this practice has really helped me do that. It's just at a different scale. And it's interesting. So this is, I started out just like what you guys had done this morning. You can see the white coming through. And then I turned my page and I turned it again. And I was using, this is Bister ink again. This is the red, is a kind of watered down. So I had this square here. And then I did this. And then later I came again with this humble little tool and wrote Ravens caw 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 over Sunset Mesa. But I noticed suddenly after, and then I did this part, stacking the letters, and all of a sudden, because I've done a lot of birds and grackles, a bird wanted to come out. It was like the shape of the bird was right there. So I started drawing, and weirdly enough, it's like feather was right there. So that's that happens when you get into this process. You start, it's like a Rorschach experience. And what I mean by that is if you know the old ink blot test where people were shown ink blots and then they would tell what that looked like to them. That's the process that I go through here. And even in these simple, contrived exercises where I'm kind of trying to come up with a demo, suddenly my imagination, ignites and a story emerges. So suddenly I was drawing this is like not a true bird. I mean, it's a bird. It's kind of an iconic cross between a raven, grackle, blackbird. And that's what gave me the inspiration to write the ravens caw, caw, caw over Sunset Mesa. Because I've been thinking about Sunset Mesas lately. So here's another example, and I'm going to walk you through this in a minute, of breaking through using drawing and the white tool, the China marker. And what I did here is I have these sunflowers in my studio. So I was doing the white on white drawing, and we can play with that in a little bit. And then I actually did what I call the color splash. I took several of these, and I'm going to demonstrate this very process in just a minute. And I just did a little scribbly bit, and then I spritzed it, and then it made this like cool pattern. And then I got the rectangle in just because, I don't know, because I had my beloved half-inch flat brush, and I did that. And then suddenly I'm back in New Mexico again. I always come back to New Mexico. And I had somehow, I think I'd written this across before any of that. Sorry, that was probably the first thing. And then I thought of a poem that I wrote because I saw this little rose stuff, and a cholla rose in morning, yawning magenta, petals stretched to greet the sun. I wrote that on the way up to the Mesa Ghost Ranch one summer when I saw this cholla blossom. So that's how my imagination was ignited just by doing this very simple process. Here's another example of drawing with this tool, breaking the surface, growing things in, literally drawing the flower that was behind me, drawing in again, turning the page, doing the same thing, but with drawing with the white China marker, anchoring it with that shape, and then writing in the space here. And then I don't know why my stream of consciousness, I just said standing at the precipice. It sounds ominous, but then I thought of it more as like, oh, I'm prepared to leap into something that's exciting. And I thought of the fool in the tarot card. That's the very first card, taking the leap into the unknown. So just a little walk through my own psyche here. And then I thought, well, my style can be so seemingly, there's a mess, and then I add things to kind of bring coherency to it. Those are examples of using just words and not using any kind of drawing or object that I'm looking at for reference. And then I was writing out, why, yes, it can be more neat and pretty if that's in your joy. And I thought, well, here's a place where I can practice writing capitals out. And I think of, again, I'm always thinking of all the teachers and all that I've learned and how I can use these pages to grow things that I've learned and to come out and play without the the watchful eyes of any kind of critical voices. And I can, really have fun with it. And so on this page, I literally wrote this first, and then I wrote with my China marker across the page. And then I took my flat brush with the remaining blue Bister ink. And then I thought, oh, wait, design wise, I'm starting right in the middle of the page. I can't do that. Then I thought, yes, I can. I'll just extend it down. And then suddenly I was at the beach, or I was in the ocean. And because I was thinking about your joy. Look what happens with that when you get such a cool variegated color with that crazy, not crazy, but this elegant writer. So just by adding that simple element, it sort of anchored everything. And then I started going off on my imagination was taking me to the beach or an ominous sky, which the thunderstorm, and then what happens after this thunderstorm. And so on and so forth. And I realize I've just been talking and carrying on. And before coming back and showing you the thing I promised with the Tombow, I want to check in with everybody. That is important for me. I want to know how you're doing because this is for you. Anybody want to share?
Hi, Sharon. Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. It's like this. I'm just so happy to be here and taking this all in. It's really amazing how you got us going right off the bat, Sharon. Like, just get in there. I've got so many books open right now, like just kind of doing a little bit of note taking. And then I had fun I'm using these 9 skills for success. And I don't have, I think, a China marker, but I'm going to look into that. And I don't have Bister ink, but I use just a chalk watercolor, to try and get some effect. But I'm going to, thanks for, I think, the host that Mary Taylor sent us the Bister ink website. So that's kind of nice. And, just some of the words that you say about, playing and improvisation and imagination. And, it's very inspiring. And it shows that, because I love lettering and I've loved studying with Heather, but I also wonder, what am I doing with that? And what you've all of a sudden done is sparked, there's a therapeutic value to this, and I work with a lot of young adult learners that are stuck. And I can see some transferability with this, and that whole, where do I start? And I love the idea of an invisible start. And then boom, you had us turning the book around and, all of that stuff. So I'm just very grateful to be here. And thank you.
Thank you. Tess.
Howdy do. I'm so sorry I had to join late, but thank you so much, Sharon, for these tips and stuff. It's not like I didn't know them, but to be reminded, you know what I mean? But it's like you always need to be reminded, and then you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. So what I've been doing lately is obsessing over the concept of time. And since I came in late and I didn't necessarily have the full instructions, so I apologize. This is probably off topic, but so I had already pre-done this watercolor painting in here, which is something I do in my journal occasionally. I'll just decide I'm just going to do some background stuff and leave it alone. And then when I have an opportunity to come in and do some lettering over the top of it, then I'll try it. So that's what I tried then this morning. And then what I thought was, I got out my Brody pen and I did this part, the heavy part. And then I don't know if you can even see it. I took some 2H graphite and was starting on that. But then I thought, I'll just write in and amongst the letters that I had done with the Brody pen, and I'll keep going. And I'll probably keep going around this rectangular area here and all over the place. probably in the graphite, since I have this darker element and the painting is dark already. So I'll probably like keep it then muted from henceforward on this page. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see.
I love that. We'll see. I don't know. I love how you're so confident about, and being able to articulate exactly what you were doing, even as you're playing. And writing those two edges of, yes, we're very conscious, we're making decisions from a place of curiosity, from a place of sometimes not knowing. And like I would say, instead of, oh, I hate that, it's like, oh, I didn't expect you.
Right.
It's
And
a,
you know, it's
oh,
like you said earlier, when you get over the whole fear of, oh gee, I just, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Well, who cares in a way, right? It's a piece of paper. So what happens if I try this or turn it around? Regardless of whether you like it or not, you're still going to make a discovery. And it may actually be something that you initially don't like, but the next day you come into your studio and you go, hey, wait a minute. I can do something with this.
you have fodder for future, yes, for future projects. So yeah, you articulated the attitude that really helps make discoveries and helps us. And again, it's a different thing than having, and this is not a replacement for setting an intention of a particular, I want this particular outcome. It's writing holding those two things. They can both be true. We're seeking our skills and the highest level of skills, while we also are letting go and seeing what happens naturally. Anybody else? There's so much more, but thank you. Perfectly. That was so beautifully expressed.
And Sharon, it wasn't something you used, but there's a question of what is a Brody pen? Can you illuminate us? Oh, it's in the chat actually now.
Yeah, anybody else? Let's take one more person, then let's get back out on the page, or I hope you're staying on the page. Staying on the page is really critical because speaking of critical, I find that if I stay engaged every day doing something, making marks, writing things, it keeps the channel open. And it also keeps my critical voice sort of engaged too. I mean, not in the sense of she's, raining terror on me, but more like busy hand, what is it? Anyway, by staying engaged, I feel like imagination takes over and my critical voice just like, oh yeah, she's got this. I don't need to try to protect her.
And Rosemary has a question. Sharon, are you using the Elegant Writers in a lot of these journals? And she loves your lettering.
Oh, sometimes I just thought I want to use things that, first of all, I had a very poor attitude towards these. You could use what are the parallel pens, the dip pens. I think those are water. You could use gouache. If we had another several hours, I would be getting out my gouache and mixing it and loading it. And I'd be showing you the same thing. And also being a little more mindful of my entrances and beginning or middles and ends in terms of the letter forms. But what I want to do is make this accessible and encourage this process, because when you do go to the more formal and well-behaved, whether tools or projects, this spirit infuses that and it helps make your letters live. And that is really what I'm trying to do myself. I teach what I want to learn myself, and I'm trying to encourage you. So that's a long-winded answer.
I see Rose. Yeah. I see
Thanks, Sharon.
Rosemary's on. Okay, Rosemary, thank you.
I just want to say thank you. That was great. Those are some great tips. Appreciate it.
Okay. Also, never underestimate the power of a pencil. So this little tool, this is always funny. Oh, if you're on a desert island and you had one tool, well, of course, then you have to have paper or you have to have a surface, or anyway, I would choose a pencil. And I love these pencils that are, they have a broad edge. And some of you who have taken classes from me will have gotten one of those as part of a little goodie bag. Usually I try to encourage using that because I like the broad edge for those of us who do study formal penmanship. They also are just great for sketching, and I'll show that in a minute. So I have several things I promised to show you. I want to show you playing again with that China marker. And for those of you who don't know or want to deal with a China marker, you could just get a crayon, just a white crayon. Or you can, if you're in the art store, in the watercolor section, they have the little clear crayons that resist. I just think they're really good for training us to trust our kinesthetic movement and gesture and knowledge of our letter forms. And one more thing, when most every class, this one is not an exception because we will be doing, if you want, a little drawing. I really encourage contour drawing because it's a way to start really observing. Drawing is about seeing, and it's about observing what's out there and you not trying to capture it slavishly, but to connect with that. And so I find that literally doing blind contour drawing with this pen, you get some interesting, cool lines, and then you can come back in with that walnut ink or any kind of inks or watercolor, and you've got this pattern on the page, and then you can draw into that. So that's what we're going to do.
And Sharon, we're nearing the top of the hour. And do we
Okay.
want to break now or after your demo?
Let's break after that. And I just want to read one more thing that has been that I live with, and it's not to say aspire to, it's try to settle into. This is from a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And I love this. The Zen way of calligraphy is to write in the most straightforward, simple way, as if you were a beginner, not trying to make something skillful or beautiful, but simply writing with full attention, as if you were discovering what you were writing for the first time. Then your full nature will be in your writing. This is the way of practice, moment after moment. So I invite you to have your full nature in your writing. And I promise you that even if you know nothing about formal penmanship, AKA calligraphy, when you write something heartfelt and genuine, and you really just do it as truly as possible, you hit that page and you write it or make a mark, that comes through. And it doesn't matter, again, how skillful it is. And in fact, I'll tell you one more story. When I was at Roehampton studying calligraphy, and this was before I had my big breakthrough, and it was part of my humbling, I was thinking, oh yeah, I want to become a great calligrapher and be the best and write beautifully. And alas, and thank heavens, I learned something completely different. But we would put things up on the wall, and my dear teacher, beloved teacher, Ewan Clayton, would bypass the really, the technical virtuosity was there and go right towards the wonkily written thing. And he would talk about, oh, this is interesting. And we'd be like, what on earth? And what he was seeing is that person was putting their all into it. And yes, they had much to learn, but there was something really refreshing about that. And your all can be in that technical virtuosity too. I think the message was just be in it, just claim it, do it. And that's what many teachers have told me as I have wrung my hands trying to make the perfect name, fill in the blank thing. Okay, so I have this sunflower. I really love sunflowers. So I'm going to, not as mindfully as I will be mindful, but I'm going to do it a little more quickly than I would do it normally. But what I would like to do is I'm going to just draw parts of it. And when I'm drawing, this is just interesting too, even as calligraphers, I might try holding my pencil differently. And in fact, when I take life drawing and I'm drawing large, this is how I hold my pencil. And it's very loose, and you can almost, it can almost fly out of my hand. So I also know that if I hold my pencil like this, especially in a gestural drawing, I can get a wider range of motion. Whichever way you hold your pencil, I encourage you today to try different, after this class, take the line out for a walk, in the words of Paul Klee, and try holding the pencil differently. Either way, I have a very light touch, but I'm also using pressure and release technique. What does that mean? That means that I press down hard sometimes and I release sometimes, while also keeping the tool on the page, on the surface. And I'm also rolling it around. And part of contour drawing is I'm not lifting the pencil at all. I'm looking at what I'm drawing, and I'm just, that is the only thing that concerns me. And there's a wonderful book called Zen Seeing, Zen Drawing. And I know I reference this a lot, but it lives by my bedside. And in it, the author and artist talks about that drawing is about seeing. And if we see something, we actually almost become a part of it. And we become part of something, whatever we observe, we're less likely to harm it. So it has a lot of implications for how we navigate our world and how we treat everything in our world. So I think drawing can really help hone our senses and help us learn to see, not just walk by things and take them for granted, especially as beautiful as a flower. So I've taken a little liberties here. Do as I say, not as I do. And I'm going to take 3 of these, at least for now, of these Tombow markers. So these are the brush pens that have 2 ends. You have this little guy, little sharp or fine point felt tip, and it also has a brush. But instead of using it to write something like I did the serendipity on that first piece, I'm just gonna scribble in. And I'm thinking about the sunflower. Whoops, I tried to put the lid on the wrong end. And so I'm actually gonna grab these colors. Why not? I do teach a Sketch Austin happy hour class. We draw a lot, and I'm really trying to get people to not be so literal. That said, sometimes we have to be literal. So when I say, put some color down on the page, it doesn't have to be, we're not doing any squares or rectangles. So I'm just making this kind of color splash. And this is where I get my little spritzer. This is also part of my toolkit in life. And I'm gonna just activate it. Watch what way it goes. I'm gonna get a clean brush, assuming it's clean. I've been playing around so much this morning, who knows? So these Tombow markers are just water soluble. And I love this because you see the white coming through. So this has been a favorite thing for me to play with lately, especially on the go in sketching out in the field. I'll do something like this. I'll look at what we're going to draw or focus on, and I'll get the colors that kind of match that. And then I'll draw into it with the white. And then I have this background. I think I'm really at a closet, what is it, a lithographer, or the person that does the multiple layers. Because I love the idea of having this layer and then drawing into it. So that, again, you can do that with a crayon. Doesn't have to be the whiteout. And interestingly enough, this process, I was asked by Umlauf Sculpture Garden, which is just down the hill from me. They have special evenings where they open it up to the public. I mean, they charge money for that. And they asked me to do, we called it color splash calligraphy. I know, teaching anybody calligraphy in an hour and a half, not going to happen. So I had little cards of the mixed media paper. I had a bunch of these markers on all the pages, on all the tables. And I had flowers on all the tables, and I had people drawing in and doing this sort of thing. I had boyfriends of girlfriends saying, look at her amazing art, look at my amazing art. I had older men who were drinking their gin and tonic, they're probably you know, God knows what company they ran. They were like, oh my God, I'm having art. So it's amazing how these simple tools can ignite the imagination and confidence of people that we would never expect to be all excited about putting these simple marks and colors on the page. So, and so that's a way to grow something, to break the surface, and to, you know, invite ourselves in a very simple way. And I'm looking for my little thing here. So I'll walk you through this, things that have already, I've done that with. So this piece that you saw on the website, basically started out like that, very similar. And I then wrote with the Tombow marker. It's here somewhere. It needs to have its lid back on. I had done something like that up the way. And I wasn't even thinking of flowers or anything. And I just happened to have some of that Bister ink, and I had with a flat brush. And suddenly that has bothered me a little bit because it's a little too square. I was back in New Mexico, and then I started drawing in and kind of thinking about the clover. And then I thought about the cholla. And so I was having like a deeply felt experience of place that I love so much, all with these very unremarkable, simple tools. And then I was writing along here. And I have this poem I just posted on Facebook today. It's like I wrote a poem called What Song Is Mine to Sing? And the first line is a whispered tendril melody twining its way towards sun. And so I thought about that, and I'm writing. So that's how, again, that whole stretching and compressing, we can be really cutesy about it, which is fine, or it can really become part of something that's very, that's a felt sense. And it also is a design element. I like integrating writing into other imagery where the words aren't calling out, look at me, read me, because if somebody just reads it, they won't stay with it very long. Usually they'll read the message and then move on. And that's important sometimes. So I'm not saying don't do that, but just know that when you add words, you will probably have the person's attention less. And honestly, I'm making this for me, so I'm not worried about an audience at all. But that's just a way of thinking about how you want to put lettering and integrate it or not into things that are referencing something else. Also, what I like to do is just have little bits of my poetry, like literally falling down the page, like I was thinking about the wisps of dandelions and blowing the letters here and there. And then I wrote something. I think I put some, I wrote this with, the fine point edge of one of these guys. And then I wanted to back it off. So I used a little bit of Titan Buff. So this is just an acrylic. I'll pull in some acrylic to back things off a little bit. And then I usually put my thumbprints in somewhere to lighten things up, or that's my chop at some point. But anyway, this is how I grew the page, just in the same way, using very similar approach. And I know we're at break time, so this is the kind of stuff we were doing down at Umlauf Sculpture Garden, where people were just turned loose. And I was like, the whole calligraphy part, I had a little sheet of italic and people were tracing that. They could do that. And then they would take what they were learning and writing something in addition to the piece. But I was just floored by how much interest there was and how much focus and attention. There were 20 people at any given time at this table where I had all these markers and things. I had a big poster that had examples of things and kind of really basic directions. And I was like, and then I got asked to do that again at another event. So it was like, people are hungry for this. And it doesn't, again, take away from, you know, all the training and skill that goes into doing any kind of art, but it certainly opened my eyes to how excited people get over these things. So anyway. And this good, carry on. I'm sorry. I'm like, I can
Well,
just.
and there is one question. Did you, let's see, Veronique says, did you first draw the flowers or colors?
Oh, the flowers came very last. Oh, the colors first. And then I used this vis-a-vis pen, which many of you guys know about. And I will find one. There should be one floating around here, and I don't know why it's in there, not in there, but it's a marker, a dry erase marker. And I like it because when it gets activated by water, it has this variegated bluish color and pink. And I like that and how it mixes with the watercolor. Whether or not it is archival, how long it'll last, I don't know, but this is, you know, just what I've been having fun playing with lately. Just one more. That's just using that marker, the elegant marker, to write and then do some contour drawing stuff, and then writing in and using gesso to back off some of the. So what will happen with this guy, this elegant marker, is it has a pretty loud blue. It's got that once it breaks down, and when you try to cover it up, it will continue to assert itself. So just know that it has a very noisy, it wants to, its presence will be felt on the page. So.
Welcome back. We hope you all had a good break. Back to Sharon.
So again, I would like to ask if anybody has any questions, because I'm just gonna free play here. Like using these markers and playing with lettering in a way that I know you remember, you may have done, or maybe you just forgot. A way to emerge on the page, a way to break through your resistances or honor your resistances, literally by using resist white marker. Just things that are very meditative and fun, and you might go, oh, that's kind of interesting. Maybe I want to keep that in my I think of it as like a backpack, my visual vocabulary, something I can turn to using different tools, using my more formal calligraphy tools, if for those of you who have that bent or training. So here I'm just using, while this page dries, I added the word vision. I was writing vision for a suffering world, and I was thinking that art saves the world beauty, the beauty of truth and authenticity, which starts with ourselves and how we show up, and we can show up on the page authentically. So that's what I was thinking as I wrote this. And then I could later come in and I might do a drawing that is similar to what I showed you. Maybe something like that. Why I was doing this is because I tend to be very light-handed and I don't go for a really graphic look in my things. And that's why I thought I'm gonna go for a very graphic. I just want to try doing something more graphic where I really like stake a claim and say, I am here on the page. But here I wrote out a vision questing, and I took I could take a watercolor brush, one of these, or I probably just took my flat brush and I just started doing this, connecting the letters by just activating the watercolors in between. So that's something I might do in a journal as a title, let's say, for those of you who've been with me. I know there's one person here. Umbria. I mean, maybe we don't want to declare ourselves so much, but maybe we do. Maybe we want the top of the page to be just that bold. And now I'm drawing the mountains of Umbria in the background of that. So I could, and that's gonna, when I add water.
And Sharon, we have a question
Yeah.
from Lisa about, do you use certain types of sketchbook paper so it doesn't bubble during drawing?
This is a mixed media. This is a new one. I haven't tried this one before. I think I got it because it was on sale at Michael's. But I like the Strathmore Visual Journal, the mixed media paper, because it will tolerate all of this. And also it'll stop if I weight it down or I close it and it'll dry, this paper will typically be flat by the time, after a while. That's a good question. And this is the Strathmore mixed media. It has, I think it's like 90 pounds. It has a little tooth to it and it tolerates all kinds of media well. This is gesso. And one of the reasons I know I don't really like this part, but years ago, Jane LaFazio, who's an amazing sketch artist and taught for many years, has just retired. She introduced me to the idea of taking out the spiral part and then using these rings. Especially like out on the, like going out to Italy, or I'll be going to Scotland, we can then take 4 or 5 pages and you have that with the backing and you can take it out on site. Another thing I like to do, and again, she's the one who showed us this, is I'll cut whatever I had. Let's say I've just done a bunch of, stuff I wasn't finished or something. I'll cut this in half and cut this off. And then using this folded edges, make a little book out of it. So I do like this paper. This is another, lots of mixed media on it. And I believe I was actually using a small broad edge pen for this, meaning like a Mitchell 6 or a Browse, whatever the equivalent of the Mitchell 6 is in Browse for that. So that's why I like this paper, because it takes a lot of media. And it also, you can use your broad edge pens, dipped pen. So this is a way to kind of start growing things, have things, break some ground in your sketchbook. You could just go through and start pages. And then you can come back when you feel like, oh, now I want to practice contour drawing. I can do that as my next element. And then you can then go from there. So that's part of improvisation, is you make one decision and then you make another, and then you go, okay, what does that need? And remember, we can always turn things upside down. We can turn things sideways, and we have a different orientation entirely. There's no reason why I couldn't start there and do again, like what we were doing earlier. And in fact, when people, like students, ask me to look at their paintings, or I'll first look at it upside down and see how's the space working? What's happening? Is there something that's too heavy over here and light over here, or something that needs activating? Or that just helps me see it in a different way. I think I brought this out. This is an old piece, but this, I had found this is another thing, is like I had found this piece of paper on the floor and it had some drops on it. So I thought, no paper left behind is my motto, or no artist left behind if we're on a trip in Italy and our bus is about to go. Anyway, this is done in a very similar way of turning the page. I'm using pencil here. I'm using the edge of my marker, which is done. This was done with one of these guys too. And so suddenly this page that was a reject, it took on some meaning. And then I took some colored pencils and started coloring there. And I was just sort of playing with the drops coming down on it. So so that's another thing. You can just splatter your paper too with color as a beginning. Sometimes I tape things off too. I have a piece, actually, again, referencing my cooking show idea, I have taped off. What does that mean? I use this artist tape, which is supposed to be very non-sticky, and sometimes it is, it does really pull up the paper. But what I do is I put it on my pants and get the cat hairs on my pants first, and then I put it down, and then I know it's probably not gonna stick. But this was, in thinking about this class, a way to open up the space, break the space. So why not do it up the side like that? And I was using the edge of this guy and then coming back in, and I was practicing versals. If anybody is taking classes in doing versals, these are very informal. But I don't have to make them formal. They don't, not every part has, I could leave this like it is and just have this be the thick part, because we know that typically we'd have a thick part here, a thicker part there, a thick part, this is the thickest. But we can play with that. This is very informal. It's more like, how does it read to the eye? And I've taken colored pencil. I used an Inktense colored pencil. These are ink pens. I'm grabbing them over here to do the background. But meanwhile, I've got this area cordoned off here, and I could do a drawing, or I could just say, you know, I'm not sure what I'm gonna, maybe I'll do a drawing of an olive branch or something here. And then do the same thing. Or I could use my watercolors. I could use my watercolor pencil. And I don't ever mind on the go using I was thinking this brush might have some of that blue on it. In fact, I might take a little bit of that blue. Where did I put it? Oh, there it is. Bold and bossy. Oops, there's the splatter. And so I have this little area, and that could be like just a little vignette. Maybe I've just gone to this little town and I don't have time to draw. Or maybe I wanted to go shopping, but I wanted to capture the essence of it. I could have my page already taped off, and I recycle this tape. I try to be careful with it so I can reuse it. I'm trying to be better about that in my life. Recycling, again, trying to be kind to our planet. And again, these are like somebody said earlier, oh yeah, I know this. I'm here to remind you of what you already know, and just to invite you to get out on the page. Now's the day. Why not? So I have this nice, neat little vignette, and I could draw into it. I might do something. I don't necessarily have to stay in that. Maybe I want to do a decorated letter. Maybe I want to do, you know, a series of things. But either way, it's just fun to do, you know, have these little vignettes. And that could be enough. Maybe you just want to write in this section. And so here I'm thinking of just like the standard grid in terms of composition and layout. I'm, you know, keeping very much a lot of margin space. That may be your aesthetic. Maybe you want to have things a little more neat and tidy and organized on your page. Or maybe some pages you do and some pages you don't, but that's a way to think about organizing and breaking the ground. So breaking ground or breaking the surface, it doesn't have to mean you have to go wild and do improvisational writing like I was doing. It can just mean, oh, I turned my paper a different way. It can mean, oh, I tried my tool a different way. Or I made a little picture, and it doesn't have to be drawn per se. It can be just like a kind of a random squiggle, but by putting it in this little rectangle, it starts to tell a story in some way. So this is, again, I'm showing you a process back and forth, coming back here. And I might have just looked at the news and everything seems depressing. So I might come to my journal and go, okay, I'm going to go back to I really want to be slow and deliberate and regulate my nervous system. I love to draw letters. It doesn't have to be deep or profound. I'm just drawing, and typically I would not have closed that off, but that's okay because this is for my sanity and well-being. So again, the invitation for this is to be the page to be a place, an invitation, a greeting, not something that you get suited up for battle in order to greet it and to face it head on. Like it's something that is, you know, there's a winner and a loser and there's a right or a wrong, but a place where you can come out and play, you can show it or not, and you can decide what aesthetic you want to employ. You don't even have to decide. You can just go in and see what happens and see what, if you hear that little voice or hear that. And when I say that little voice, I don't know how else to describe it. And maybe some of you can help me out who have been in this journey a while. How is it that you know to do something? And again, it doesn't have to be woo woo. It's just like, oh, you have accumulated, all of you all have accumulated design knowledge. Even if you don't have formal art training, you have put outfits together, you have decorated houses, you have observed things. So we have that record. We always have that in us, and we can reference that. And so that's what's coming through maybe when I hear red, is that, I don't know. And sometimes it's just a mystery. I will say that artistically, I've ended up in all sorts of interesting territory, very unexpected, not always welcome territory, because I have allowed this process of following imagination and not just trying to stay in the line, so to speak. Any thoughts? So there, I just took my ink and went right through after outlining everything. Just for fun. It just seemed like that's what it needed to happen. And honestly, I don't even work that much in this way where I set up a very clearly stated path like that. I usually get into much more messes and have no idea what I'm doing. More like this territory. Even this started I was thinking, again, this was done in thinking about you all. And I was in my Sketch Austin happy hour class the other day, and they were off doing something. And I got myself into all kinds of messes here. And this is, oh my gosh, it's a combination of the drawing with the China marker, walnut ink, red Bister ink, definitely this marker. And yes, so I think how I started this was the white drawing. You can't even see any of it there, maybe just a little bit over here. And then I did the scribbles with a pink and then spritz that. And then I was like taking my brush, and I was thinking again about Ghost Rancher. I was thinking about New Mexico, and talking to my class and letting my right brain run amok, so to speak. And then we had lilies in the class, so I decided to draw into what was there. And I had this bold business. That's when I decided I would try to, I had these really bold lines. So I wanted my writing to echo those lines, and just kept going from there. And there you can see my little letters kind of sprinkling around. And I wasn't in this to like make something in particular. I was just like, oh, I got myself in this. How do we, and I was enjoying it. And using all those little techniques of stretching out the writing, using the edge of my pen, playing with some script that I have been playing with for several years, and all the while trying to bring some sort of coherency to this page so I could live with it. And it may not go anywhere other than, or I could take this apart too. That's another way we can break the surface. I could chop this in four, and that might make an interesting, I'm sure it would make an interesting little group of paintings. And in fact, that's a way I like to work. I will put my heart and soul into some big piece, and then realize it's just all over the place. So I just cut it up and it starts becoming something else. And that is perfectly valid. And I'm going to pause again because we have like 25 minutes. I really want to hear anybody's questions about techniques, tools, anything, and also just about this process of improvisation, using these tools, any struggles, I mean, it doesn't have to be, it can be whatever. Whatever's authentic.
Could you give us the name of the first Zen book that you mentioned?
Yes. Where did I put that? It is called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It looks like this by Informal Talks on Zen Meditation and Practice by Shunryu Yu Suzuki. And another along that lines, a lens through which I've intended to live this year has been through, it's a Chinese term called Wu Wei, spelled W-U-W-E-I, or the art of effortlessness and non-trying. So that's an interesting one. And it's I think it has a lot to do with what we're playing with here, because it turns our assumptions about, oh, I got to work hard on this piece. Just the language that we use, it turns our assumptions about how we practice art kind of upside down, in the sense that we have to employ that sense of, and it's like what he said about going in like it's the without that aspirational, I got to make it this good, I've got to make it, but what comes out of us naturally. And so I've been playing with that, and I really struggle because I think sometimes I minimize what comes out naturally, and I forget, because that's why I teach what I want to learn myself, that what comes out naturally is not something that I learned overnight. Some of the things I've done have been there. If you look back over the years and how much time I have put into studying lettering and studying drawing, all that accumulated knowledge is there. What the Wu Wei is, I think the point I'm trying to, or the way I'm trying to embrace that term, is to let what I do naturally be enough. And I know, and so I just ask you to chew on that for a while. And and if anybody has experience with that, it's a Taoist concept too, of the effortless, of non-effort. And for someone who has used language of, I got to make this work, I'm trying so hard, that is a shift too. And one of the things I'm talking about in the book that I'm writing is about how language, what we tell ourselves, what we say out loud, really does shape our experience, good or bad. And I am daily challenging myself to be nicer to myself and to say, one of my dear friends and mentors said, and she was quoting this from somebody else, it's like, let the words you speak be worthy of the silence you break. And so that's what I was thinking about too, with breaking ground and breaking the surface today and allowing something to emerge, is like, what do I want to say? What are the words that I want to use and meditate on? Because when you write these words, you're infusing them with you, and what's the word I'm trying to say? It is a form of meditation, and you're infusing the meaning of that word, I think. So words are important. Here I go pontificating again when I've asked you how you're doing. So enough for me already.
I took a class from you in 2005, and it was "The Journal is the Destination." And
Oh, we need to unmute you, Lily. Can you unmute?
yeah, and
Okay.
this was a drop of water on my I was swimming and it was on my goggles. And those were the colors, I swear, that were there. And when I came home, I put in all the colors that I could see in one drop of water. So,
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
and it's the first page in the book that I worked with you on the West Coast in 2005.
I remember that.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing. I love that, how that organically, literally, the drop of water became the way forward in terms of what you put on the page. I love that everybody's really engaged. I was going to say working so hard, and then I realized I just talked about that. Anybody relate to that though? Just that how we sometimes make or we engage in calligraphy, maybe in particular, or art in such an effortful way that it becomes burdensome. Has anybody, raise of hands, had that experience before? And here's another invitation then. Are y'all willing to play with another way, with even changing our thinking about it? So we could say to ourselves, I am going to play with this. What if we substituted work with play? How would that be? Would that feel subversive, or like somehow we're like not? I mean, I love that when I come up to them and they'll say, I'm just playing, as if to minimize. I'm like, that's the direction. Stay on that path. Ignore everything else I've said. Go there. And in fact, some of the things I think I'm just a catalyst. I'm trying to maybe, I say rebel against everything I say, just so you find your way. And Laura, you had a question.
Well, I just wanted to say that I've certainly been busy with my garden, and I took the class to try to get me back into, doing my book. And I think what really stuck with me is I don't have to be elaborate, just simple tools, 3 things. So thank you.
You're welcome. Well, and again, I teach what I want to learn myself.
Simple.
I know. I think of that song I sing to myself, when true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend and to not be ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful because, oh my gosh, it's like I go to the supermarket and there's so many choices. Is that a good thing? I don't know. It just overwhelms me. So I like to go to the little, maybe more expensive, offbeat little place that you get one choice.
I agree.
Sharon, you're such an inspiration, and I can't help but think of the 2 women in the background, too, Heather and what is our host?
Mary Taylor.
Mary Taylor. You've come together as a team to offer us not only, technique and creativity, but a real soul searching kind of experience. And I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now, like I just want to cry. It's so precious. And that permission, to be simple and to play. I mean, I'm 65, and it's almost like we've been hammered, with how, okay, you're too old to play now, you're too old for this. And what you've done, what you're doing out there is just saying, hey, no, you can still get a good result, but it'll be your own result. So I'm just very overwhelmed and so pleased. And I thank Heather and Mary and you for doing this. I wanted to squeeze that in before I know we're not done yet, but anyway, thank you.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, again, I overcomplicate things and I make it hard on myself. And so I'm hoping that y'all don't have to walk that dark path to get to the light. Yeah, I think so much of our struggle is what we tell ourselves, and we tell ourselves that because that's what we learned. And I will say, I don't want to negate or even denigrate our critical voices, because they're there to protect us, even though they're not welcome. So much of like for me, if I say, oh, it's just this, I'm protecting myself by saying, already getting to the criticism before somebody else can. And so now it's like, if I put something out there, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, criticism or not, I know it's coming from me and I'm trying to stay true to me. And so it's an offering to the world, and some people aren't going to like it and some people are. Anything else around just speaking to letters, lettering, informal calligraphy, handwriting? Any last minute, can I lead you astray? Can I help rein you in? Whatever I can do to offer assistance. I'm trying to be here as I would if I were in a room with all of y'all.
And we do have a question from Stacy. Can you
Okay.
suggest another brand of markers besides Tombow that are not permanent?
I think there's some at Michael's. They have like their own brand called Artist Loft. Although I had some of my Sketch Austin people in the studio the other day, and they were trying them, and they didn't have they didn't flow as well. Honestly, too, even the Tombows will work differently on different type of paper. No surprise there. They are water soluble, but sometimes that splashy, effect that we get doesn't work as well. Again, I've been using, oh, there you go. That is Lily. Which brand were you using?
It's an SAI, and I use the yellow
Oh,
and
you
the
got it.
green and the blue, and then I spritz it like you did.
Beautiful. Yeah. So there you go. And I love that you're holding it up.
Yeah.
The marker box.
Yeah, it's SAI. They have lots and lots of colors too. So
Oh, and this is the marker I was talking about. So many of you, anybody who's played along with me knows about this, the vis-a-vis. And again, I just like it because it has such a variegated, I'm looking around for an example. No, that's not it. Anyway, it has a beautiful, well, I'll just do it right here. I don't need to go find an example. I can do it right in front of you. Now I gotta find my flowers. I have these, I don't even know what they are. And I have to, when I let my cat in the studio, I have to move all the flowers and plants out because she likes to eat the flowers. And I don't know if this one is poisonous or not, but it's been in my studio. So I'm doing a quick, do as I say, not as I do, a quick contour drawing. Because remember, take your time with this. I find contour drawing as a lovely meditation. Actually, the book I reference, Zen Seeing, Zen Drawing, Frederick Frank, who's the artist, used to hold workshop. Alas, he's no longer living, or else I'd say, let's all take a workshop from him. He would come around, he conducted his workshops in silence, first of all, and people would be drawing, and he would say, oh yeah, you're not really focused. He would basically be calling out people in his gentle, loving way that they weren't being true to the process. They were going too fast. Or
We do have a couple of questions in
Oh,
the
yeah.
chat. Lisa asks, what suggestions do you have when you get stuck trying to keep going when you're breaking the surface?
Oh, I think doing multiple things, try something else, turn the page, go, try something completely different. Even maybe having a very specific task. Sometimes I rein it in and I go, I'm just going to practice press and release Roman capitals. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I mean, it's having something that is like, I go back to familiar ground. For me, that may not be familiar ground, but just whatever that would look like for you. So I might do something that feels like, very satisfying. So that's where I'm writing these capitals, I'm pressing, and it slows me down, slows my breathing. Anybody else have an answer for that question?
I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier when I was showing what I had done, but what I am trying to do nowadays is just start with a shape, just an outline of a shape. Maybe I paint it in, maybe I don't, maybe I just write around it or write around it, and let that be a very simple way of beginning so that it takes that anxiety of the blank page away.
And-
Absolutely.
And then we have another really nice question from Janet. How do you use your discoveries and explorations to create more formal pieces?
That is a good question.
That might be our last question today.
Well, that's a good question, because part of my intention for this summer is to do just that. I've been sort of in the playing field for a while, and I do plan to start using some of these things in larger pieces. Like I'm going to do some canvas work and canvas play, sorry. And then, but then, you know what? Every time I set out an intention, and that sounds like a shirking of responsibility, I literally, there's something inside me, I call it my art spirit, jerks me away into something else entirely. So stay tuned. I don't have an answer for that just yet.
Okay.
I do know that when grace happens and I'm seized by this desire to create something, I'm already primed. I've been playing and I've been practicing and putting all these things into practice so that when I do want to put it in a more formal setting, I feel so much more, I don't have to, it's not like I have to rehearse a lot. I can just bring that in to that, whether it's like more formal calligraphy or more formal drawing.
And now can we go back and see the wash over the vis-a-vis marker?
Oh yeah, well, I haven't done that yet. So I was actually, so here's the vis-a-vis marker, and I could either spritz it and I could it takes a while, and sometimes it does that. It'll break down into this. You start to see, it's so interesting, the colors will start to break down in it, and you'll get this, again, it's just barely, let me see if I can get a close up, even closer. This walnut ink is a little anemic. I think the walnut ink, I'm not using that as an excuse, but it's not quite as bold. And also with watercolor, it works really beautifully. So that's the vis-a-vis. And this is, I stopped even knowing what I was writing. I'm just writing letters using that press and release. So that's very calming to me, oddly enough, as I start doing letters like that. And it's a kind of a meditation. But again, like others say, let's get out on the page. I haven't done anything to the page yet, but with these, but I'm thinking about the sunflowers and what I have in my studio here. I mean, if that's what it takes to kind of reignite, I mean, what harm is there in that? A little bit of splash here, a little bit of, then you can like, and if some of you say, well, I don't know how to paint, this sort of gives you a way into that too.
And Sharon, as we wrap up, We want to certainly thank you for an inspiring session. And for those of you who would like to keep learning, can you please tell us a little bit about your workshop in August, Deep Harvest, and your upcoming workshop in Scotland?
Yes, Heather and I are going to be collaborating on a workshop, play shop, and it's called Deep Harvest. And we will be playing with similar ideas, different tools, but we'll be making a series of things and starting. And this, again, for many of you may not be new ground. We're just inviting you to take wherever you are and to go a little deeper and maybe try that new technique that you've learned. And we'll be showing you some other things, and we'll be actually crowdsourcing our ideas of how we will use what we start out with. So we'll start out on larger pieces of paper, we'll make things, and then we can decide, does this turn into an accordion book? It may for some people, or will it turn into a broadside, or will it turn? And again, this is not new for many of you, and it's certainly the way I like to work, especially with, and that to that point about what happens if I'm stuck. I sometimes just get out on the page, a big piece of art just text wove, and I just, I'll reference something, a poem or a thought in my head, and I'll either make gestural marks, or maybe I'll do a large contour drawing and then go from there to break it down. So that's one thing. Stay tuned for more on that. And also, I invite you to join me in letting me lead you astray in Scotland in 2025. I'm excited to be collaborating with Traceless Tours. Raven, and why I'm forgetting her last name, but she is out of Asheville, North Carolina, and has led Celtic spirituality and music tours in Scotland. And I very kindly invited me to do a Sketch Scotland tour. So that's in September of 2025. And you don't have to know how to draw. You don't have to know how to paint. You can come and use 3 of these materials and you'll be just fine. So it'll be, I think, a very interesting adventure. I'm excited because I haven't been to Scotland in a very long time. And it sounds like a very nice, literally cool place to be, temperature-wise, and inspiring.
Well,
So thank you all, and thank you, Mary.
yeah. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll hope you'll be with us next month for the live session where we'll share the projects we've been working on. So happy lettering.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Not goodbye till we meet again.